Hello, hello, hello. My name is Madison, and this is no longer Murder, She Told. We'll get into that in 1 second. I just want to say I'm so happy to be back filming again. I'm batch recording my next few months of content, so I'm so excited. This is coming out in April, and we are going to be talking about the Flint Water Crisis. Before we get into the true crime story about the Flint Water Crisis, I just wanted to say a couple things about why this is no longer Murder, She Told anymore. Long story short, I was hit up on Instagram from another creator. Her name is Kristen, and she has had a podcast called Murder, She Told for I don't know how long, but for a while. And she was really sweet, and she was just like, I saw your stuff around. It's really great, but I just want to let you know that I'm in the process of trademarking the things necessary in order to get Murder, She Told as a trademark under her company so that she can start licensing merch and stickers and things like that. And she has a pretty big, way bigger community than I do. So, obviously, I was just like, you know what? I'm just starting. I am a newbie. I had no idea you existed. I promise, I swear. But what I will do is let you know that I will be in the process of changing my name. So what I decided to do is rebrand from Murder, She Told. My whole channel is gonna be called Madiswan, which is my nickname that my high school friends gave me in high school. They still call me this to this day. It's also the name of my Instagram, and it's also the name of my TikTok. So it just made cohesive sense that I would just switch it over to that. So new banner coming. New channel name coming. All of these things are coming soon. And thank you, Kristen, for just being so honest and sweet about it, and letting me take my time with, finishing up the content that I had already recorded to then be able to change everything over. So new things happening soon. I think first and foremost, or secondly and second most, I am really active on my TikTok. I do a lot of previews for new episodes. I get into more information on old episodes. So if you don't know, follow me on TikTok. The link is in the description below, as well as follow me on Instagram if you just want to see just little stuff. I'm starting to post more on Instagram, so you'll see more stuff, more stories, my day-to-day life kind of thing. But yes, both are _Madiswan_. What else can I say? So yeah, that's that for the housekeeping. So on this episode of True Crime in Society, we are going to be discussing the Flint Water Crisis. Now, if you weren't aware of the Flint Water Crisis, this is something that happened between 2014 and is still kind of the remnants of it are still happening to this day. The Flint Water Crisis got national news attention in the 2014, 2015, 2016 time slots, but it was neither the first nor the last situation of its kind, and we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit as I tell you guys the story. Now, what is so important about this channel? And I just want to take a moment to talk about this channel, the new Madiswan channel. With my True Crime in Society videos, and I've said this before and I will say it again, okay, it's important for me to discuss true crime and my personal definition of what true crime is on both the micro and the macro scale. So we're going to be talking about things like the Flint Water Crisis in the same lens of true crime as we would be talking about, say, the Evelyn Hernandez case. And if you want to check out that True Crime in Society, that video is on my channel. I did it for March. But I want to talk about both things and talk about them in tandem and discuss how both things influence the other, if that makes sense, when it comes to my true crime videos. So I know I've been quoted to say on my other videos that the Evelyn Hernandez case was really one of the most intense moments where I was like, I need to make a true crime YouTube channel about cases like Evelyn Hernandez's case. But The Flint Water Crisis, as I started working on my YouTube channel behind the scenes, the Flint Water Crisis situation was one of the second things that came to mind, because this story is diabolical, period. It's just one of the most egregious cases of just neglect, hate, just governmental harm to a community of people. And it still hasn't been completely rectified. We'll get into that more in the story. But I just want to say that this is true crime to me. As I keep telling you, this is a true crime story to me, and it needs to be discussed. We need to talk about it, and we need to look at it through that lens, because not all true crime situations are about pre-calculated, premeditated murders or anything like that. Sometimes true crime is about just outward neglect and hate and non-care for a particular group of people. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. So if you want to learn more about the Flint Water Crisis through the true crimes lens, if you are curious about this story and have never heard it before, please stay tuned for this story, this True Crime in Society installment. I'm really excited about it. This has been a long time coming, truly. If you're new here, please like and subscribe and comment down below, interact with this video. That'd be wonderful for the channel. And if you're returning, like and comment and say your opinions down below. I'd love to hear it. Love you guys. Let's get into the story. The Flint Water Crisis really came into my immediate consciousness during my college experience. I went to UC Santa Cruz from 2014 to 2018, and the Flint Water Crisis was the news about it. We had lots of donations. We donated water to them several times over on our campus and through the BSU and things like that. So it was one of those things that really characterized my college experience, because it just lasted for such a long time. And it was such a wake-up call for me. I think I was going through this kind of time period in my life where we were reeling after what happened with Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown, and then the Flint Water Crisis, and I was kind of just like getting more and more internally angry at the way the United States government runs. There's a joke on social media that the United States government is a third world country with a Gucci belt on. Kind of is like one of those little meme things that make you laugh. But when you think deeper about it, a lot of third world countries have things that we don't even have, like, universal health care and different things, like different things that actually are trying to benefit the people in poverty, the workers of this country. And our country just doesn't have it because we thrive on capitalism. Capitalism makes the world go around. If it ain't about dollars and cents, they don't have feelings to throw towards it. And that's just a point blank period. And so when the Flint Water Crisis came into my consciousness, I was like, why aren't they doing anything about it? Because I remember they were saying, okay, to replace the pipes, it would be $55 million. Something around that. And it's like, as many billionaires as we praise and we have in this country, billionaires with the B, they couldn't come together and donate or raise $55 million in order to help this community of people who were drinking lead. And then, your mind starts to race. Why? Yes, the government is supposed to step in. Yes, the government has that money, but why is nobody doing anything about it? We are talking about years of people drinking lead. Okay, and that's what makes me so fired up about this story, because this is not a up to interpretation kind of thing. This is not a opinion-based thing. This is not one of those political things that you can have a right-wing opinion or a left-wing opinion about. This is about health. This is about science. This is about people's lives, children's lives. This is about freaking lead poisoning. And we're over here dragging this out, gaslighting people, telling them the water isn't what it is. It just angers me to my core. And this was one of those situations where I, as a young adult, growing up during this time and being just like, oh, okay, again, rudely being awakened to the fact, and not truly, but just another stab wound to the back about how this country really, really doesn't care about big swaths of its population. We don't care about the poor. We don't care about Black people. We don't care about trans people. We don't care about sex workers. We don't care about women. We don't care about people of color. We don't care about indigenous people. This country likes to pretend like it cares about diversity, and that's the thing that makes us stronger. But things like this happen and people just don't care. The government doesn't care. It's sick. This country is sick. And we spend all of our time in wars, in proxy wars, spreading the power of democracy to countries that didn't really always ask for it, didn't really ask for our involvement by any means. And we're not actually genuinely spreading democracy. We're trying to make economic relationships flourish so we can get richer. Capitalism, of course, is at the center of everything. And this is how we treat our most vulnerable citizens. So I want you to keep that in mind when I tell this story. I just want you guys to understand that, like, one, this isn't an anomaly. This is a pattern. And this is true crime. So without further ado, let's talk about the Flint Water Crisis. Sorry, one other thing that I wanted to put in here. I remember in high school, I was in AP Environmental Science in my high school. And I remember learning that in this country, in the world, we produce enough food to end world hunger several times over. We have the food to save people from going hungry. But we just don't do that. It's how we choose to distribute the food that causes world hunger. And that changed me. That changed me forever, because it's like, okay, we've been donating, we've been told, save Africa, send money, send clothes, send food, send water to Africa, all of these things. We have it. We just choose not to distribute it to people in need. And that has still never been fixed. So when I learned that in high school, I was like, oh, this country, this world, it's just diabolical because it thrives on inequity. It thrives on hierarchy. And we're going to just get a little bit more into the darkness of that aspect, especially in this country with the Flint Water Crisis story. So again, without further ado, let's get into it. So for context, in 2003 in Washington, D.C., several neighbors in a community in Washington, D.C. realized that they were dealing with a similar problem with their water pipes. They were experiencing a lot of leaking, and upon further research and discovery, they found that there are several little pin-sized holes in the copper pipes giving them water to their houses. And for reference, if you don't know, this is super strange because copper pipes are supposed to last up to 50 years. And the copper pipes in this neighborhood were relatively new, some of them being about a year or so old. So they started asking questions because if it wasn't just one house and it was a whole community, something was going wrong with either the water or the pipes or the putting in of the pipe. So they started asking questions. So this group of homeowners decided to come together and try and find an expert in this field to see what was going on with their copper pipes, because obviously it was a bigger problem than just an individual problem. So they contacted a man called Dr. Mark Edwards, and he was a researcher studying this exact thing, pinhole leaks in copper pipes at Virginia Tech. So he's a perfect guy for the job. They asked him to research what was going on in their community, and he found some things. So what Dr. Mark Edwards decided to do was go to one of the homes of the homeowners and kind of test a theory, which was there's a change in the chemistry of the water going through the pipes. So he went to one of the houses and decided to test the water for lead. The lead tester maxed out. So he was like, oh, surely this didn't max out. Let me try again. But he diluted the water by 10%. He tested the water again, and again, the lead tester maxed out. And he realized that the water that these people were drinking, cooking, bathing in would be considered toxic waste by the amount of lead in this water. Okay, it maxed his stuff out. So he was like, okay, does no one know what's going on? Is everyone okay? These people had been eating, drinking, washing with this water for years, not knowing that the chemistry of the water had changed. So he started to work tirelessly to get this remedied and to get the powers that be, the government, to notice what's going on in this community and fix it, because this was none of their faults. These are pipes made by the city, so this is none of their problem. And the fact that there's not clean water, you can't trust that there's clean water going into your home. Because think about it. How many times have you thought twice about the water that you wash your hands with, that you bathe with, that you cook with? How many times have you really thought twice about whether it is polluted or not, or has lead or not? These are things we take advantage in a country like America. So when you test that water and find out that water, the contaminants of lead in that water, the concentration of lead in that water would be considered toxic waste, you have to go and run up to the government and tell them to answer for this, because in a country like this, the least that the government can do is give us clean drinking water. So anyway, so just in general, just for context, lead is extremely toxic. And lead used to be in paint. It used to be in everything back in the day. That's why they say a lot of boomers have brain damage, because they grew up on lead being everywhere. And so basically for children, because the brains are still developing, lead can cause irreversible brain damage and behavioral issues and just things that cannot be reversed, right? For adults, it can cause hypertension, anemia, brain issues, and other health issues that, again, cannot be reversed. Now, in the United States, the acceptable amount of lead to be in a water supply is 15 parts per billion. And in these DC homes in 2003, it was 1,250 parts per billion.
Electric chair.
But this wasn't the first time that alarm bells around lead poisoning, lead in the water in DC were being discussed. In 2001, 50 homes in DC were tested. Their water was tested, and all of them tested with elevated lead levels in their water, well above the national average. This was marked down, and nobody did anything about it. Nobody told city council. Nobody told the mayor. Nobody was informed about it, least of all the people who were consuming this water. Okay, in 2003, over 6,000 homes were tested to see the concentration of lead in their water. And 2/3 of these homes had elevated lead levels than the national average. and nothing was done about it. In fact, nobody knew about it until people on their water bill months and months later were told, this water may not be safe to consume. Be careful. There's danger. There's lead in this water. There may be lead in this water. You may be exposed to lead on their water bill. There was no national anything. There was no city council meeting. The mayor didn't address the people. Nothing was done except for the water companies on their bills had to say, danger, there may be lead in this water. Sketchy. In 2004, the drama about the lead in the water had finally reached enough people that it got national news attention. It was picked up by the media, and everyone in DC started to panic about the concentration of lead in their water. And it took the pressure of the community, of the people, to push. And finally, the mayor signed off on a $300 million plan to replace all the pipes and, make sure that this doesn't happen again with the lead pipes. But that took about 200 news articles from the Washington Post and 6 congressional hearings to come to that conclusion, as well as that $300 million plan to reverse what happened with the pipes wasn't going to be done till 2010. So people are stressed, people are panicked, there's lead in the water in DC, blah, 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 blah. At one of the congressional hearings, Dr. Mark Edwards discussed that the DC had switched the way that they sanitize the water. They'd switched it from adding chlorine to adding monochloramine. And monochloramine basically leached the lead out of the pipes into the water supply, as well as leached the lead from the water fixtures that people had in their houses and put that in their water supply. So again, negligence. The craziest part is Dr. Mark Edwards had to fund all of his work with this particular homeowner group by his own pocket because the governmental systems that be did not want to fund it. In fact, threatened him to stop working with these people. And by the end of 2004, his contract with the EPA that he had worked hard to receive had been canceled because he refused to stop helping this group of homeowners rectify the situation of the lead in their water and hold the people accountable. So, of course, that naturally led him to be really anxious, really stressed. He lost 35 pounds in 3 weeks, and his anxiety went through the roof because he couldn't understand why, if he was trying to uncover something that was wrong with what was going on with the water, the environment, the health and safety of the public, you would think the governmental system would be happy about that and would be happy to fund it and put the full weight of their governmental powers behind it to make sure this situation is rectified in DC and to make a plan to make sure none of this happens again to any other city, state, or whatever nationally ever. Because exposing people to lead is just one of the most egregious things you can do. And it's not just people, it's families, it's babies, it's elderly people, like irreversible damage. So because he was so anxiety filled by how he was noticing the government attacking him for showing them that there's a health and safety problem here that we need to rectify, he was stressed. He lost 30 pounds in 3 weeks, and he just couldn't reconcile the fact that the government was attacking him for doing something that he's supposed to do. This was literally his job. In 2004, other governmental agencies like the CDC came out with investigations and findings that lead wasn't that harmful for the body at all. And it was fine. The lead water, the people will be fine. And this guy, Dr. Mark Edwards, was just creating hysteria around the lead in the water. The findings that they found is that people were relatively unaffected and it wasn't a big deal. But through the Freedom of Information Act, Dr. Mark Edwards was able to obtain documents that proved that the CDC falsified these findings from their investigation. In fact, they hadn't tested anyone who had been exposed to the lead in DC at all. They had tested people that were unaffected by the lead in the water, meaning their homes were out of range for this to be happening to the water in their homes. So they knowingly tested people that had not been affected by the lead in the water and used that to skew the findings and publish these findings to say, these people are being hysterical, there's nothing wrong. And they knew that. So he found that out through the Freedom of Information Act. And he's just like, why are they trying to cover this up? It doesn't make sense why they would go to these links to falsify documents to say that lead poisoning, despite all that we've learned about lead poisoning in the years to come, in the past years, that it was not affecting these people at all, and it was effectively harmless when they didn't even test those people on purpose. So he was like starting to, find the bigger, badder criminal link behind what's really going on with the government and why are they attacking me for this and falsifying documents about this. It doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, because of this, the CDC had their investigation. Many major publications ran with it. Mark Meadows is one doctor, one man, so he couldn't counteract the media push that was pushed behind these findings from the CDC that were false. So many people in many different states in the country were pointing to these saying, see, you're fine. There's no lead. And even if you were exposed to lead, you should be fine. This is not a big deal. And pointing to what the CDC said, not knowing that it was completely falsified. So basically, this whole CDC document was used to discredit a lot of people saying, there's lead in my water, I'm scared and panicked, to try and quell the population so they wouldn't question the government anymore. And I think some of the saddest facts about this DC incident, we're not even at Flint yet, but this DC incident was that several thousand children were exposed to the lead, and over 2,000 pregnant women miscarried. Yeah, which is pretty crazy, due to the lead in the water. And no one was reprimanded. No one was taken to task. No one was arrested. No one was, told to testify about it. It just got swept under the rug. And, Mark Meadows was out of a EPA contract, and he realized the only people that were ever held to task or reprimanded for anything in this whole situation were not the people who caused it and refused to act on it and were negligent about their power. It was him and the other people that were trying to blow the whistle so that these things could be fixed and people could be kept safe. So he kind of lost interest in the government. I mean, how could you not? I mean, and this is the people in this homeowner community, the people in DC who were affected by the lead in their water, never trusted the government again. Could never trust the government again. And this is how these things boil up. It's the way that our government would rather rely on bureaucratic systems instead of just fixing stuff. It's the way that our government would rather pass the buck as often as they can, instead of just being like, we messed up, we're holding ourselves accountable, we are paying these people out, we are making sure they have free healthcare for the ailments that they definitely have, and we are fixing their pipes as soon as possible in expedited time. We can never just do that. It always has to be falsified documents. Hush, hush. I'm not pushing this to the top. Or if I'm at the top, I'm not telling anyone else about what these findings were. Hiding, burying evidence, all of this stuff. No one was taken to task for this. And all of these people were gaslit by the CDC and the government about what happened to them. And no one was blamed for it. It's crazy. Now, here we go. We're going to get into Flint right about now. So let's get into it. On April 25th, 2014, it was a huge day for Flint, Michigan. Okay? They were taking control of their own tap water. For what people don't know, over the past 50 years, Flint had been using Detroit's tap water. So Detroit had been sending water through their water system to Flint and pumping them with water for over 50 years. And on April 25th, 2014, they were declaring independence from Detroit's tap water and moving to an independent source of water for their own community. Now, Flint had been on a downward trajectory since the 1980s due to Reaganomics and the shutting down of many well-paying factory jobs like General Motors and things like that. Michigan was a big car area, and Flint specifically was a huge car area. And so General Motors had a huge plant there, and many people got a lot of their business, a lot of their money, a lot of their livelihood through working with General Motors. And in the 1980s, they shut down. So ever since then, Flint had been kind of barely hanging on. Flint had once been one of the most thriving car places in the United States. Like I said, General Motors was there. And when they left in the 80s, over 40% of Flint fell into poverty. And during that time of deterioration, though Flint had once had a bustling 200,000 population of 200,000 people that lived there, half of that amount of people fled as soon as Flint started to deteriorate, mostly the white half, because it was, unable to sustain itself. What a lot of people don't get is a lot of these places that are now struggling were once thriving, and that was because of things like, different types of factories, clothing, textile, cars, medicine, things like that used to be in these communities. And once Reaganomics hit and there was this push towards capitalism, free market, and outsourcing, a lot of these jobs were outsourced to other countries that were 1,000 million times cheaper. So a lot of people were left shit out of luck, basically, because their whole livelihood, their whole family, generation after generation, were able to make a living from this one company in this one area. And so Flint, unfortunately, was one of those places. It's poor and it's mostly Black. So keep that in mind. So in 2011, Flint, Michigan basically announced a state of financial emergency. And what the mayor did was hire an outside emergency financial contractor to look at and audit the places where they needed to cut spending in order to be able to save money to get out of this financial emergency. So the one place that this emergency financial manager found was the water supply. In order for Flint to get water from Detroit, they were spending $1 million a month to get Detroit water. Okay, so that was the one huge expense that could be cut and that could save Flint from going down under in financial strife, because it was one of the most expensive things on their thing. So what did they decide to do? They decided to make plans to have Flint be built up enough to have its own water supply. This is where things get messy. On April 6, 2013, the emergency financial city manager came out with a plan to basically cut off ties with Detroit for their water supply, for, saving the financial situation in Flint. So they told Detroit, kind of speedily told Detroit about this plan, and Detroit was like, cool, we will cut your contract and we will take you off the rotation in a year's time from now. So basically the contract was cut and they had a year to build up the water infrastructure in Flint to replace what Detroit was giving the people. Okay, so the issue started immediately because they were jumping the gun immediately to try and slash costs without really putting into consideration what it would take to build up Flint's own clean water initiative, clean water infrastructure for its own residents. What was found was, in order to safely do this with all the right checks, all the right permits, all the right things to be done, It was going to take 2 years to build up Flint's own water infrastructure. But Detroit was like, we're cutting off the water in a year. So they basically jumped the gun with Detroit and told them first, got the contract cut first so that they didn't have to pay as much, and then realized that it was going to take 2 years. So the cutting of the corners started immediately, basically. City officials, basically this comes out about the timeline discrepancy, and the city officials are like, yo, it's cool. We totally planned for this. It's totally fine. In the meantime, what we will do before the pipeline is done, so for a year between Detroit ending the contract and us having our own pipeline for clean, fresh water and infrastructure for that, we are going to use the Flint River as a water source. Now, the Flint River had been a water source up until 1965. And so they basically were like, we planned for this. The Flint River is a good enough water source for a year's time. It'll be totally fine. We will use that. Cool. The people were fine. Then the propaganda started. Many scientists and local governmental officials were saying how the Flint River was so clean, the water was so fresh, and they had done all the necessary checks to make sure that this water was going to be indistinguishable from the Detroit water that they had been getting for the past 50 years. So the people obviously believe them. Okay, this is your position. This is your job. This is your position to call the shots. So clearly you're not going to put people in danger by giving them dirty water, right? So if you're telling me and you have scientists up here propped up saying this water is clean, the Flint water is clean, we used to use it, blah, 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 of course, people's guards are down. So people were like, cool, this seems like you guys have it all planned out. We trust you. Let's get it. When time came to end the relationship with Detroit for their water, they had a huge ceremony. All the city officials were paraded out. They drank a cup of the water in front of everybody, and they're like, oh, it just tastes like water. It's totally fine. They shut the valve off and then had from Detroit and then had the water flow, and they drank the water, and they're like, this is delicious. It's indistinguishable. Everyone, it's totally fine. But what they didn't know, or what they did know, I like to think they did know this, but what they quote unquote didn't know was that the water from Detroit was still going to be pumping through their system for another 2 days. So the water that they were drinking was still the Detroit water. It was not the Flint River water. And less than a week later, it became extremely clear that the water from the Flint River that had now become the main water source and was cycling through to everyone's houses was not the same. People said there was an odor. There was an oily texture to the water, there was debris in the water, and there was kind of a brownish, rusty color to the water. Yikes.
14.
Here's the Flint.
And who decided to do this exactly is under intense debate. But regardless of blame, the story gets worse. Residents saw and tasted the dirty water and started complaining.
Water's brown, has a bad odor. I'm afraid to even feed it to my cat or my dogs.
We should not have to pay for the water.
So reports of plants dying, pets getting sick, people getting rashes all over their bodies started to spread through the Flint community. You know, it was kind of quick and also slow at the same time. There was one account of a guy who basically drank a cup of the Flint water and was throwing up bleach water all night long. There were accounts of people who had progressive hair loss. There are many accounts of rashes, pets dying, plants dying, and all of these things. And when the plants die, if you watch horror movies, when the plants die and the pets start dying, you know shit is bad. You know it's not good. So basically, it was very obvious that people, living things, were dying and getting sick from consuming this water. So the people started to notice and complain, obviously. Basically, the Flint officials, as people started to get rowdy about this oily brown water that was killing their pets and causing rashes for people, they were like, yo, hold up, give it some time. We haven't used this pipeline for a while. We haven't used this water source for a while. So give it time to cycle through. It should be fine in a few days. There's debris because it's been built up and it hasn't been used, but the water is safe. They said that. The water is totally safe. Don't worry, it's just debris from the buildup because the water source hadn't been used in a while. Okay. Well, later that year, the water was tested and there was evidence that coliform bacteria was present in the water. Now, coliform bacteria isn't necessarily dangerous by itself, but what it indicates is that there is other disease-causing bacteria within the water. So that's not good. So basically, reports about boil your water first started to come out, and the residents, again, were getting freaked out because with the water supply that they're supposed to trust, things keep happening. These decisions were made above their head in order to slash budgets. They went with it. Then they were told the water was great and all the city officials drank it, but that was still the Detroit water. Then when the Flint River water started coming, it was orange, it was brown, there was debris in it. It was oily to this touch. It had an odor. People were getting sick. Plants were dying. Pets were dying. People were getting rashes. People were getting hair loss. People were throwing up. And they go take it to their city officials like, this is all happening. And they're like, oh no, it's totally fine. The water's safe. It's just the debris in the water because we haven't used it for a long time. And then the water gets tested and there's disease-causing bacteria present in the water. So you can understand how the residents of Flint are like, we can't trust you. What's going on with the water? Is it clean? Is it not clean? What's the answer? After the bacteria was found in the water, it was officially said to boil your water. Boil your water. This is getting handled. And then the water was declared safe just 4 days later, which is not enough time in the slightest. On October 18th, 2014, General Motors talked to the city of Flint and said they needed to stop using the Flint River water because the water was corroding their machinery in their factory. Just take a moment. Take a moment to imagine this. All this propaganda, all of these things, the people of Flint were told to drink their water normally just 4 days later after that bacteria was found, okay? All of this drama, people are getting sick. Pets are dying. Things are happening to this community. And they know it's the water. Okay? And then General Motors hits the city up and is like, yo, the water's dirty as hell. It's corroding our metal machinery to the point that we can't use it. We need to switch water sources. So we are no longer using this water source. And they decided to purchase water from a nearby suburb that was clean and fresh and totally fine. None of the residents knew this. It was not widely talked about. They were just quietly allowed to switch water sources because the machinery at the General Motors factory was getting corroded by using the Flint, Michigan water. These people were just being told publicly to drink it normal, that there was nothing wrong with it. Being gaslit to oblivion. Imagine if this water was corroding the machinery at General Motors so much that they had to up and totally change their water source so they can continue to produce cars in the factory. Imagine what it was doing to people's bodies. Imagine how toxic that water is. Honey?
Oh, please, in the fridge. Please, in the fridge.
Red flag. TTHMs were found to be in the water source, in the Flint, Michigan water source, okay? And what TTHMs are, it's when chlorine reacts with the microorganisms in the water and they leave TTHMs in the water. and they are carcinogens, and extremely toxic and extremely dangerous. So this is what was being fed to people as safe in Flint, Michigan. By January 2015, the TTHM levels far exceeded the national average and what is, scientifically accepted to be in water and things like that. And it is around this exact time that the Michigan state government starts purchasing bottled water only for its employees. Bottled filtered water only for its employees that worked in the state government, and said nothing publicly to the people of Flint about their water. Honey?
Electric chair.
So after the TTHM levels were discovered to be exceeding, and the state government was like, on the hush-hush, only drink bottled water, not telling anyone from Flint, 4 days later, the governor said, and the mayor said, that the water was safe to drink in Flint again. You seeing this pattern? So by this time, Detroit had basically heard that Flint was having a bunch of issues with their water supply, and they offered to waive the $4 million reinstatement fee in order to get the residents of Flint their clean water back from Detroit. Again, but the emergency financial manager was like, nah, we good. We're going to hire our own people to do tests on the water. Thanks, but no thanks. This is January of 2015, guys. A few days after Detroit had hit up the emergency manager, like, we can hook you guys up with the fresh water you had. Let's do this fast. We'll waive the $4 million reinstatement fee. The emergency manager, Darnell Early, quit his job and got a new job as the emergency manager in Detroit of the public schools in Detroit, which was a immediate raise in compensation, and he just up and quit his job during this time. That was the third emergency manager to quit on the people of Flint during this time of the water, to get different jobs, to get pay raises, and none of the stuff that he was privy to was he trying to either fix or fix. He didn't want to reinstate the water from Detroit. He just up and quit and was like, I'm gonna get a raise and live in Detroit. And that's what he did. And none of the stuff that he knew about the water, none of the stuff that he knew about what was going on in the State Department with them being like, only drink bottled water on the hush hush, none of that was told to the people of Flint. He just straight up quit on them for a fucking raise and got more money. Guys, I'm telling you, this story is insane. Like, when I was rereading the script, I was like, this story is bonkers, positively bonkers. As things were getting progressively worse, the people in Flint started to organize. They went to city council meetings and different meetings that the local government was holding to complain about what was happening to them. So many people were saying that they've lost their hair, their teeth were messed up, they had breathing problems. All due to the water. They had rashes on their skin that couldn't go away, all due to the water. And these meetings would often erupt in heated anger, because in the face of these people telling them, I have rashes, I have lost my hair, I'm losing teeth, I have breathing problems, all since the water was switched. The water, something is wrong with the water. These government officials just looked in their face and said, oh, it's safe. I don't know what's wrong with you. The water is safe. I drink the water. The water is safe. All while the State Department is providing them with cases of bottled water so they don't have to consume the water in Flint. They are straight up gaslighting these people to their face and saying the water is safe. I don't know what you're talking about. While people are talking about hair loss and breathing problems and rashes that won't go away since the water was reinstated to the Flint River. Okay? Sorry, my nose, I have allergies, so I apologize. It's kind of creepy and gross. Anyway. So that's the length that the government will go to protect itself. And I want to pause here for a second and just say the enemy here is fucking bureaucracy. Okay? And this is what they say about World War II. It was a very bureaucratic war, meaning there was a structure, there was a power structure, that B. The orders came from the top, and they were passed down throughout said power structure, right? And with bureaucracy, it's a nameless, faceless thing. So everybody is allowed plausible deniability at a point. Oh, I was told and given orders by the person above me. Well, they were told and given orders by the person above them. And they were told and given orders by the person above them. But when it goes to the top person can say, well, I told them this, but they did this, and blame all the people below them. So it's this never-ending thing with bureaucracy, which is why it's the enemy, because you can't put a face to it. You can't put a name to it. And all of these people on the city council, who these people were like, yo, look at my mouth. Look, I have problems with the water. I have a rash on my hand right now because I use the water to bathe. And you're telling me the water is safe. And they're doing this because it takes too much work in a bureaucratic system to do what's right. It's too exhausting. There's too much red tape. There's too many people to go through. And they intentionally put it up that way so that you are a drone that just follows orders. But what happens when those orders affect human life? What happens then? Who's responsible then? Oh, you're just the clerk at the blase blah. Your boss told you to blue, blue, blue. You see what I mean? So the enemy here is bureaucracy because it shaves down a person's will who works in a bureaucratic system to push for what they know is right, what they know, to tell the truth, all of these things, because it's all about mindlessly taking orders. And if you mindlessly take these orders, it's supposed to shield you from any personal responsibility, but you're still responsible. These people are lying to these people's faces, saying that the water is safe when they all know the water is not safe. They have been getting cases of water bottles to use at their homes, in their offices for months at this point. And they are over here saying, oh, the water's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. It's sick. It's sick. So I want to again pause here and just say this. This is what true crime at the macro is. It's a combination of people with weak spirits, broken down drones, and bureaucracy. It's not always this like pre-calculated, like I said in the introduction, thing of like, we are going to target this community and do this, right? Because Flint, like we said in DC, like in Newark as well, Newark, New Jersey, they're having similar issues with their water as well. This could happen anywhere. This could happen anywhere. But it's the difference in response. For example, I'm going to do this, a little cute example. All the amazing, beautiful, thriving Black communities in the LA area are either rezoned or gone because they wanted to build freeways, they wanted to build parks. Dodger Stadium was built on top of a thriving Latinx community in LA. Okay, these communities are always up for being on the chopping block, and it's because people with lower income live there, and so they don't really have many options. They don't know how to advocate for themselves. They don't have access to that. Here's an example in my real life. There's a freeway that is basically the main vein of a freeway. It's called the 210 or the 134, depending on what way you're going. And this is the freeway that most people in my neck of the woods in Southern California use to get to downtown LA and other things like that. Okay? The 210 freeway ends in a place called South Pasadena. And basically, construction has been stalled on connecting the 210 to the 710 to make it more of an easy, route to get people from this neck of the woods to downtown to other places in LA. It's stalled because South Pasadena and Pasadena are one of the wealthiest, whitest places in Southern California. And when I say money long, I'm saying money long, old money, old money, like for real. So they have the resources to stall out all construction of an entire freeway while entire communities of color are wiped off the face of the earth because they can't afford, or they don't know, or they don't have access to the same things these people have access to. So when I see this, right, it just reminds me of that in so many ways, where it's like, these people don't have access to it, and that's why you don't care. These people are trying to advocate for themselves, and you can write them off because they're not rich. They're actually really poor. They're black. They're not as educated as other people in the country. They don't have access to as many things as other people, other communities in the country. So we can do this. We can gaslight them to oblivion. We can make sure bodily harm happens to them while we're secretly getting cases of water bottles to us and to our families to consume. But they can't. We're not going to tell them the water is safe. And we can just sit there and just say it's safe to them. And also subsequently stall when it comes to getting the money to fix the pipes when the problem is too big for you to lie about anymore. Stall when it comes to getting people the money they deserve. Put people accountable. Holding yourself as a governmental entity accountable. None of that happens when it comes to people of a specific hue, or people of a specific socioeconomic standing in this country. Because like I said at the top, capitalism is a snake that eats itself. We're doomed. Like, not to be alarmist, but we're doomed. Because if you do profits over people all the time, this is a situation that should be cut and dry. You know the water is oily and smelly and rust colored. Water is not supposed to look like that. You know there has been an influx of people getting sick, old, young, and in between. And you're not doing anything about it. And that's the issue. Because like I said before, lead is a cut and dry issue. This is a yes, there's lead, or no, there's lead. No, there's no lead. There clearly is lead. So because this has nothing to do with the individuals who live here, this is not their fault that they live here and this is happening to their water infrastructure. It is of the people in the higher up positions who made a rash decision in order to slash a budget when they didn't have the proper infrastructure information built up in order to make sure that this was a seamless transition. They just did it and gaslit, right? Because all of this, no one, it's not their fault. But what you need to do in that situation is go above and beyond and make sure these people are getting access to clean water, getting access to safe stuff. All government bodies need to get involved in order to make sure this isn't going on for an extended period of time. It's fucking lead, dude. There are babies that live here, and you're over here gaslighting these people about their own kids? This country, I swear to God, it's sick. It's sick. It's sadistic. This is sick, what they did to these people. And like I said, it's not always this pre-planned thing. It's about how quick are they going to respond when something bad happens? How quick are they going to fix an issue if it's in a white community with a lot of money versus a community of color that has 40% of people under the poverty line? And you see with the Flint situation what it takes. People have to go above and beyond to get the nation to notice it. And these people were still gaslighting them. Let's continue with the story, child. A woman named Leanne Walters had basically had her entire family go off the grid when it came to the Flint water supply. They were not using Flint water to cook, wash, anything for months before a lot of people were noticing things. And the reason why she did this was because she was noticing a severe difference with her son, Gavin. Now, Gavin and his brother were twins, and they're both 6 years old. Okay, she was noticing that Gavin was getting affected by the water and the constant exposure to the water worse than his brother, though they're both seeing, effects of being exposed to the water. In Gavin's case, he was 6 years old, having behavioral issues, having developmental issues, and he was only 27 pounds, which is really small for a 6-year-old. His brother, who was his twin, had some similar behavioral and mental issues, but he was 30 pounds heavier than Gavin. So as she's seeing what this water is doing to her twins in a real time like case study, because she has twins, so she can see, the discrepancies. Gavin was thinning hair. Gavin had to relearn the alphabet at 6. He was only 27 pounds. He could not understand simple things he used to be able to understand. His mental development had completely stalled, and his brother was dealing with similar things, but in a milder way. So she was like, the water's cut. I know it's a water. We're not doing this water thing anymore.
A tender moment between mother and son, Leanne Walters wants to keep positive for her twin boys, Gavin and Garrett.
I don't want my kids to be victims in this. I want them to know they're survivors.
The 5-year-olds have suffered because of lead in the water. Gavin is 30 pounds lighter and 2 inches smaller than his twin brother. Let go. Leanne says the children don't speak as well as others their age. They struggle with hand-eye coordination and have a hard time writing their letters and numbers.
That's their most frustrating part for school for them. Reteaching them things that they had already known. Their ABCs, their colors, their numbers, that kind of thing. Where's your 3? Okay. Where's a 6?
She's homeschooling the twins and says they are improving, but
they have developed some of the behavioral issues when it comes to lead, with the lack of impulse control, the anger outbursts.
Then there is the psychological impact on these 2 little boys.
Gavin's having some self-esteem issues because of the height and weight difference. There's days where he really struggles with that, and I'm sorry, for a 5-year-old, that's not okay. In their little heads, it's clicked. They understand that they were poisoned, and they understand that, we've had questions about, are we going to die? Can the doctors fix us? That kind of stuff. And we addressed it. We're honest with them on a 5-year-old level. So when we talked to them about it, it's, yes, this is what's happened. And, these bad people made it happen. We've got all these good people who are trying to make it better. And you're not going to die.
What Leanne Walters did for the safety of her family was hire the EPA to come to her home and test her water. Okay, so instead of 15 parts per billion, which is the, ratio that we said was, safe when it came to lead in water and items and things like that. In Leanne Walters' water supply, her lead levels were 104 parts per billion. And the EPA person told her, do not, and I'm warning you, use this fucking water. Don't use it for anything. So she stopped using it. Well, guess who shows up to save the day? Dr. Mark Meadows shows up because he had publicly been like, this is going to happen again. You guys didn't hold anyone accountable in DC. There's no initiative for people to be honest about what's going on with the water supply. It's going to happen again because infrastructure fails all the time. And this is how it's going to be dealt with. Swept under the rug. So he was like, nah, we're not doing this. He showed up to Flint with his group of researchers from Virginia Tech and started getting to work. So Dr. Mark Edwards started handing out testing kits to several hundred people in Flint so they could test their own water, bring the testing kit to him, and he can kind of get some data on what's going on. Leanne Walters' second testing kit that she did herself came out to 3,000 parts per billion instead of 15 parts per billion. And her last test was 104 parts per billion. Still high, but it's getting actively higher at 3,000 parts per billion of lead. So yeah, shit got to get crazy. After the results of Dr. Edwards's, home kits came in, he made them public, and the city council in Flint voted unanimously to get back in connection with the Detroit water supply. Well, at this point, their vote is meaningless because Flint was in such a state of emergency. They hired outside people, the financial guy, Daryl Early. All of these people had the final say on whether or not they were going to do something or not because they were in a state of emergency financially. So it didn't matter what the city council unanimously voted, even though they had been gaslighting these people and finally came around once the results of the tests were published. it had to go to the emergency financial city manager to finalize whether or not the Detroit water would be put back into Flint homes. And he voted no. His name was Jerry Ambrose, and he was the fourth and final emergency city financial planner. After he was there for a while, Flint got out of their financial emergency, so he was let go. And the original state of being in terms of how politics in Flint were able to continue, local politics in Flint were able to resume after he left. Around this time, Leanne Walters got a call that officially, confirmed that Gavin had severe lead poisoning and anemia due to the water levels. And her house was tested again for the levels of water, the levels of lead in her water. And remember, the last time it was 3,000 parts per billion. It was 13,000 parts per billion in Leanne Walters' home at this point. And that is way more. That's hazardous waste, like hazmat suit level amounts of toxic lead in her water in her home coming out of her tap. So Dr. Edwards basically was like, this is literally the worst case of lead in water I have ever seen in all of my 25 years of working in your house. Pretty crazy. Essentially, similar to DC, the water was corrosive to the pipes, and it was leaching the lead from the pipes directly. Now, Leanne Walters did her own research and found that this whole situation could have been completely avoided had Flint and the powers that be came up with a coercive control plan. Okay, so what that would mean was what they're supposed to do when they started using the Flint River was fill the water with anti-corrosion chemicals and, minerals and things like that. So then as the water flowed through the pipes, the minerals from the anti-corrosion, whatever they put in the water would form a crust inside the pipes, a mineral crust that the water would then flow through. So the water would no longer have any contact with the pipes itself. It would go through these anti-corrosion crust that was internal in the pipes and flow directly to the people. So it wouldn't be leaching the lead from the pipes themselves. Because water is powerful. Water is powerful. That's how we have mountains. So constant flowing of water can erode at things. And so what was happening in DC and Flint was the water was going straight into these pipes, and it was slowly eroding at the layers protecting whatever was internally in the metal in the pipes, what the pipes are made of. And those things were then getting put into the water in debris and other ways and whatever. So because Flint was hasty about this water decision, right, they basically were like, you know what, we're not going to put safety measures in place. This is a safety measure that every state in the United States, every city in the United States has for their water supply. Flint was the only place that didn't have it. So for them to be like, oh, we didn't know, it was a mistake. No, if you're going to have new water supplies and have the right experts around you to help you facilitate that for a community of human lives and people, they would have told you, you needed this. You needed to put that in the water to create the crust so that the water wasn't just flowing naked, bare through the pipes. You see what I'm saying? So, of course, that was another situation that fired Leanne Walters even more, because it's like, you guys were so negligent from top to bottom. From saying that you could do this in a year, from not having the proper things in place, for propagandizing and lying and saying that the water was tested when it wasn't, for putting people on stage and having them drink big glasses of water that was actually Detroit water, from secretly having state officials and local people who work for the state government to have cases of water that they use for them and their family, and they weren't being exposed to the fucking issues with the water, to gaslighting the people that the water was safe, all this time until finding after finding came out that there was huge amounts of lead in the water, and you didn't even have any of the protocol in place to properly do this. It's asinine. in June of 2015, an EPA worker named Miguel caught wind of what was going on in Michigan. He knew about the lead levels in Leanne Walters' home. He knew about all of the issues that were going on in Flint, and he wrote a memo to his superior. His superior decided to do nothing about it. She just brushed it off and kept going on with her day. A few weeks later, that memo was leaked to the press by the ACLU, basically pointing to how this goes all the way to the top, the negligence, the bureaucracy, and the way in which people are handling these people who are literally being exposed to toxic, hazardous waste levels of lead in their homes. It's just being brushed off because people don't want to do the extra thing to try and handle and right a wrong that these people had nothing to do with. Instead of moving forward after this memo was leaked from the EPA person, the mayor of Flint decided to go on live TV and drink a cup of Flint water, another propaganda campaign. So by the end of 2015, Dr. Edwards had gotten 90% of the test kits back, and he was able to use the data to make a good map of how far-reaching was this issue with the lead in the water. Basically, it was confirmed that over 40% of homes in Flint were having severe lead poisoning and exposure through the water supply. 40% of homes in Flint were having this problem. And all of these results were sent to an institution called the MDEQ, I believe. Yeah, the MDEQ, which is in charge of like the water and things like that, infrastructure and stuff like that. And again, it was immediately dismissed. So awesome. We're learning a lot. But Mark Meadows was not going to do what happened in DC. He wasn't going to roll over. He wasn't going to allow them to bully him this time. So he challenged the state to hire whoever they needed to take the test that they needed to take in order to prove that he was wrong from his results that he got. And they declined to do it. So instead of rolling over again, what Edwards did was he went to a 4th grade classroom in Flint. He taught the children how to test the water in their homes and was able to replicate the same results he had with these 4th grade kids in the classroom that he got from his month-long situation in 5 days. And he published those results. So it was consistent. Okay, 40% of homes in Flint, Michigan had this problem. Again, he tested it with the kids in the classroom. And he wasn't trying to humiliate anybody, but he was trying to help these people advocate for themselves and push and push and push until these people were not being manipulated and lied to. This was incredibly humiliating to the EPA, the MDEQ, and all of the infrastructure and governmental systems that be, but so be it. If no one was going to do anything about it, he was going to do something about it. He's a G. In September 2015, a pediatrician, Mona Hannah Atisha, conducted her own study with 17 kids that she took care for, and she found that 4% of the kids were exposed to severe lead poisoning, and that percentage tripled in a year. So she obviously was getting hip to what was going on. And so she went to the press about it and was finding another brick wall in front of her, similar to what Dr. Mark Meadows was dealing with. Basically, she took her results to the State Department, basically telling them stop using the water. And they basically were like, the Flint River water is perfectly safe. Even though what you're saying is concerning, the Flint water is perfectly safe. Then they started putting out propaganda saying, oh, this is a seasonal spike in lead. This has been going on for over a year at this point. This is a seasonal spike in lead. So the Flint water is safe. All they could do nothing but shift the blame from person to person, but never could squarely look at what the evidence was pointing to was that the Flint River was a terrible water supply for this community. They didn't want to admit that as a whole they fucked up. It was individuals. It was this person. It was this choice. It was this. They didn't want to hold up their end of the bargain and take full responsibility. And it's sick. It's sick. It was early in October 2015 that the Michigan governor finally broke his silence and basically admitted to the process being flawed and people not knowing everything about the switch from Detroit water to Flint water, and the whole process was done rather poorly, but he was still not putting any blame on the Flint River for anything and was trying to be solution based and not hold anyone accountable. But of course, not everything could be reversed. The people of Flint have been gaslit upon just like to oblivion at this point. Everyone was in their face saying the water is safe, the water is safe. It was only until they could no longer say the water was safe after they had the data from the children that Dr. Meadows had helped, get the data from the children to replicate his data. It wasn't until the pediatrician was like, yo, these kids are sick. They're being exposed to freaking lead. Hello. Something needs to happen. It wasn't until any of these happened that it wasn't until months later that the governor was like, we did something wrong. Okay, we'll switch back to the water. And that's it. Not blaming any of the people, the EPA lady that let it slide, the MDEQ that dismissed testing the water, the mayor that just got on live TV to drink the water, thinking that would make people feel safe, the city council officials who were saying the water was safe as people were showing them the medical effects of using the water on their bodies. You can't reverse that. You wonder why people of color, black people, indigenous people, women, sex workers don't trust the government? This is how we live our lives every day. Being gaslit all the time for pointing out issues and things, structural infrastructure, systematically, all the time. And what do we get from it? Be gaslit. We can't admit we're wrong. You're wrong. It's sick. And when you compare that to when you know that Flint is 40% under the poverty line, you know it's majority black, you know if this was a rich white little suburb, this would not be happening. The people knew back when General Motors said, yo, this water is totally corroding our metal tools in our factory. We're switching to the other water that the white people use it. They knew, and they were saying this was safe for babies to drink, for elderly people to drink, for families to drink. It's just crazy. It's sick. So in 2016, what was going on in Flint finally really got national news and got national traction. So the eyes of the nation were like, what's going on in Michigan? Why are you doing this to these people? This is crazy. President Obama came in good faith and basically visited with the community in Flint and basically said they were going to do stuff to help. And the new mayor basically took the crisis seriously and declared a state of emergency in Flint, Michigan for the water crisis. Unfortunately, the rest of Michigan didn't really care. So basically, back in late 2015, an investigation was done and the governor basically placed the blame on the MDEQ, which I said was in charge of the water and safety and things like that. And basically he blamed them because they were told several times they did nothing, blah, blah, blah. The MDEQ was also then charged in other things because they were very aggressive and defensive when people came up with actual results that there was lead in the water. And their whole job is to make sure the water is safe to drink. And they refused to test several times, even when the data was in their face. And they were aggressive about it, so they were charged again, which is, good-ish, I guess. After the findings of that investigation came out, the two heads of the MDEQ resigned effective immediately. So, obviously. And after they resigned, the governor declared a state of emergency and requested $55 million to go to completely taking out the pipes and doing lead-free pipes and replacing them with lead-free pipes, which would cost $55 billion. And then a week later, President Obama also seconded a state of emergency, which means they got an additional $5 million from the federal government for tests, filters, and all these things that they needed to help the people in the meantime of Flint, Michigan. Another investigation was done and on the MDEQ, and basically it found out that they were privy to the fact that the water was not good over a year and a half before, and they did nothing about it. They decided not to do anything about it. They did not care about these people. In February 2016, the House committee decided to do their own investigation on what happened in Flint, and the governor was asked to come and testify several times. He declined. He then came and he got tore up, fucked up by the whole, they were reading him, and I'll insert a clip of that, of course.
Citizens have fought so hard. Our families have endured so much. We simply deserve the same safety and opportunities for our families and children in Flint as anywhere else in America. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Now turn to Mr. Edwards. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
After hearing the testimony of Susan Hedman this morning, I can't help but comment on the qualities that seem to be valued in administrators at the EPA. Willful blindness, in this case, to the pain and suffering of Flint residents. Unremorseful for their role in causing this man-made disaster. And completely unrepentant and unable to learn from their mistakes. Ms. Hedman said EPA had nothing to do with creating Flint. EPA had everything to do with creating Flint. Malfeasance at the U.S. EPA from 2001 to the present has harmed cities all over the United States. And incredibly, even as National Guard walked the streets of Flint distributing bottled water and installing filters on taps, Michigan and the EPA are able to say that Flint has never failed the lead and copper rule. And this is possible because the EPA has effectively condoned cheating on the lead and copper rule monitoring since 2006. This is because EPA and other agencies caused a similar lead and water crisis in Washington, D.C. from 2001 to 2004 that actually was 20 to 30 times worse in terms of the health harm to children in Washington, D.C. And they completely covered that up for 6 years and wrote falsified scientific reports. And it created a climate in which anything goes across the United States, anything at all, to cover up health harm from lead in drinking water. Since 2006, when we realized that this cheating was occurring, I worked with a small group of people who tried to expose these practices to EPA, and we failed. We failed to get EPA to take lead in water risks seriously. And because we failed, I was not surprised when Flint occurred. I was expecting a Flint to occur. If a landlord were to engage in similar practices and through their negligence to allow even a single child to be exposed to lead paint risk, the EPA would argue for prosecution and incarceration. Yet EPA has allowed entire cities to be unnecessarily exposed to elevated lead in their drinking water. And they've covered up evidence of their unethical actions by authoring these falsified scientific reports. And they've never apologized for what they did in Washington, D.C. And incredibly, to this day, they have not apologized for what they did in Flint, Michigan. No apology from EPA. Completely unrepentant and unable to learn from their mistakes. I guess being a government agency means you never have to say you're sorry. And yesterday, I have to say, I was dumbfounded to read an op-ed by EPA Administrator Gina McCarty that effectively absolved EPA of any wrongdoing or any role in creating the Flint disaster. Aside from creating this climate in which a Flint was allowed to occur, I purposely observed, witnessed, and uncovered wrongdoing by Ms. Susan Hedman at the U.S. EPA in covering up this problem. Ms. Hedman, at every step, aided, abetted, and emboldened the unethical behavior of civil servants at the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. She allowed Flint's children to be harmed. And why should she not suffer the same or a worse fate than a common landlord who does the same thing? Had Flint residents not fought for the truth with the assistance of compassionate outsiders, it's incredible. The harm to Flint's children never would have been exposed. And so to quote Ms. McCarty's closing op-ed statement, I do agree with her. It's tragic it took a disaster of this sort to get this issue the attention it deserves. Let's do something about it. Ms. McCarty, you could start by acknowledging EPA's failures over the last decade to enforce the provisions of the EPA lead and copper rule. This is a critical and necessary first step to make EPA once again worthy and deserving of the public trust and its noble mission. Thank you.
He was asked to resign several times, but basically he decided, and he stayed in power for his last term completely. He was able to complete his last term in 2016. So I guess not everybody felt the blame equally. You know what I mean? Bureaucracy, I'm telling you. The Flint residents basically still did not feel safe about their water, rightfully so, because they've been gaslighted to oblivion. They basically told the governor that you need to drink this water for 30 days straight and publicly so that we can see, you know, you can either feel the effects or we can see whether or not the water is actually clean. He did. It still didn't alleviate any tension amongst the residents of Flint. Of course, they were rightfully upset, so they stopped using water altogether, and the mayor, who, again, like I said, was taking this seriously, once she was instated in late 2015, basically supported the people not drinking the water, and that's kind of where we're at with that. On April 20th, 2016, the DA basically came out with the results of the investigation on the MDEQ and basically called out all the people that were going to be charged. They were all charged with felonies. And basically 2 years, $8 million, several hearings later, 7 people were charged with felonies and faced those felony charges in court because they were neglectful to the whole community of Flint. But of course, they never saw their day in court. And you know why? The new Attorney General, Dana Nettle, decided to dismiss them of all their charges. So they walk free. They roam free to this day. They never got their day in court. As of 2019, over 75 lawsuits have been filed for the MDEQ, Michigan itself, the governor, all the people who were involved who faced felonies at one point. All of those are still in litigation. No conclusion has been found on those to this day yet. But at this point, Flint has one of the best lead levels in the whole country. No one's water is tested as rigorously as the Flint water, but like we said, the damage is irreversible and people have to live with this for years to come. So, yeah. When you sit here and hear about this case, you can't, with a soul and a conscience in your heart, tell people to trust the government blindly. What these people had to go through to prove that the water was this, when everyone knew that the water was not good. They were lying to their faces. I said it. I said it a million times. They knew the water was bad. No water should have an odor, should be oily to the touch, should have debris, should have any of these things, should have a color. No drinking water, no washing water, no cleaning water, none of that. And in a country where we are supposed to have the things that a lot of countries don't have, there's absolutely no reason for this to have ever happened in the first place. But the reason why these things get covered up so often is no one wants to go out on a limb and say, you know what, we fucked up. We aren't ready to switch from Detroit water. We're going back to the Detroit water until we are ready to fix it. It should have happened as soon as the complaints of the oily texture in the water from the Flint River came out. Kids have brain damage now. People have long-lasting conditions, rashes, hair loss, breathing problems, all because of the exposure, long-term exposure to this water, the lead poisoning. And they knew about it. They knew about it the entire fucking time. These people in Flint were not just blowing smoke up people's asses and pretending for fun. They knew that the water was not clean. They knew it from the jump. But they did not want to go back on what was supposed to be a good look for Flint to be independent. Fuck that. Go back to Detroit water until you can do it properly. But they didn't want to admit publicly that they were wrong. So people have lifelong illnesses. That Leanne Walters' son Gavin was 6 at the time, and had to relearn the alphabet. He's never going to get better. It's sick. And this is one of many. Like I said, it was great. I'm happy that I started in the DC situation because it added context. Because this is one of many situations that happen, continue to happen, still happen at the hands of the United States government, or because the United States government, or in the United States due to the United States government. They all knew. So at a point, the neglect becomes deliberate. At a point, the neglect becomes very pointed at a specific community, at a specific socioeconomic level. And you can't deny that. It's sick. It's wrong. It's disgusting. And I don't know. This country is fill in the blank. But without further ado, you guys, please like and subscribe. Press that notification bell if you enjoyed this conversation, if you enjoyed this True Crime in Society installment. I have a ton of videos like this. So if you join the content, you might as well join the family and subscribe to me. There's a lot like this coming, so be ready for that. Again, like I said, I'm changing the name of the channel. I'm changing my banner. I'm in the process of that. So this is called Mad Swan now. So get used to that. It's no longer Murder She Told. I'm going to link Kristen's info in the bio too, so you can check her out because she's also really wonderful. She has great content as well, true crime content as well. And yeah, so what else do I want to say? Follow me on TikTok. Follow me on Instagram. All the links are in the bio. Comment what your thoughts are on this case down below. But without further ado, Black Lives Matter and free Palestine until it's backwards. I love you guys so much. Bye.